Let's move into another supplement that is gaining a lot of momentum when it comes to brain health and beyond, methylene blue. And
Yeah.
there is so much controversy around this one. A lot of people loving it, a lot of people fearing it because it is synthetic, and there's even talk of making the brain blue by using it.
Uh-huh.
I've experimented. I'm a fan to this point, but I do want to learn more. Talk about what you've learned and what research is showing.
It's funny because methylene blue does accumulate in active neurons. It originally started as a dye that could be used for a dye in the nervous system. So it can actually, right, at very high doses, it could turn your brain blue. For most people, that's not the thing that you need to think about. So, but it's just like, it is technically true, and that's part of the history of methylene blue. So I think it's interesting, but what is particularly interesting to me is that the evidence is pretty thin. Like there aren't really good studies. So say you take a group of people in their 60s and you give them some methylene blue or a blue placebo and you measure like various aspects of their cognitive function. Those studies exist for creatine. They do not exist for methylene blue. And the best evidence for methylene blue is very high doses, like 1 to 4 milligrams per kilo, right? So we're talking potentially hundreds of milligrams in a setting of acute hypoxia. So now we're talking about like if you were taken and dumped on the top of Everest, or you're a fighter pilot at, tens of thousands of meters above the earth, right? In those settings, so if you do acute hypoxia, methylene blue seems to maintain some aspects of blood perfusion to the brain and some aspects of cognitive function. But that's like one study. For like day-to-day people taking methylene blue, there's very little good quality evidence that people should take it. Now, theoretically, it's been proposed in Alzheimer's disease and like in some animal models of impaired like metabolic function in the brain, which is part of the picture of some dementias. It seems to restore function. And it's because it can help to improve ATP production in the mitochondria. Now, the problem is that depending on where the deficit comes from, like the theoretical deficit that your methylene blue is overcoming, it may or may not be a good thing, because if your mitochondria are already performing well, methylene blue can make them short circuit and perform less well. So I know a lot of people who use methylene blue, who recommend it to clients, who say they've seen benefit. So I believe that there are people benefiting from it, but like, do a study and send me a paper, because right now almost all of it is anecdotal. And even when I talk to people who sell methylene blue, like have methylene blue products and like are big believers in it, and like I believe them. I believe them to be truthful and dedicated researchers and physicians. Those studies don't exist. I'll tell you that when I take methylene blue, like a standard like 4 milligrams small dose, my cognitive function tanks. I feel terrible, like particularly in word finding. Like I just cannot get words out of my mouth. Like my brain just doesn't work well. So and again, this is anecdotal, right? This is all just like, I tried this and I feel this. I don't have I didn't measure anything. That's just how I feel. So I think that there's probably a subset of people where the mechanism makes sense and it could help. I think there's also a subset of people where it could be detrimental, and there's a subset of people where it's not going to do anything or very little. But right now, I can't tell you who is who in that. There are people who say that they can do that, and there are some people who are developing tests that say that they can tell you whether methylene blue will work for you or not. But again, like that research doesn't exist. So it's all based on mechanism and a hypothesis. So it's interesting, but until like some people actually do some high quality work in humans, it's not something that I'm going to regularly recommend.
So it sounds like it, because of your experience with low dose methylene blue, you've tried it a handful of times. it's decreased your performance.
Yeah.
So you've pushed it aside, at least for now.
Yeah, for me. And like that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't take it, but having also tried to look for good quality research on methylene blue and cognitive function that's relevant to most people, that it doesn't exist yet.
What about nicotine? This is another one when it comes to the brain cognition. It seems like more and more people in our world are using it as a nootropic to, stimulate word finding and cognition. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, we're probably in the world of nicotine, we're probably a little bit closer to methylene blue, but like on the scale of like, because we talked about so much about creatine, we have creatine one and methylene blue at the other. Like nicotine is like close to methylene blue, but like on the way to creatine. Like everything about like the evidence and that kind of stuff. I think there is some interesting evidence for nicotine potentially in neurodegenerative disorders. So one of the things that gets lost in Alzheimer's disease is acetylcholine signaling, right? And that's where like nicotine binds to those receptors in the brain, could help with memory formation and retention. So there are some scenarios where it could be beneficial. So one of the reasons why one of the first drugs that people get prescribed for Alzheimer's disease is a cholinesterase inhibitor that prevents acetylcholine being broken down. I think we have much better evidence for that than we do for just like sticking nicotine patches on these people. So like that's where I would focus. But there are some small studies that say that nicotine can improve some aspects of cognitive function. The problem, this problem is also relevant to caffeine, is that it's slightly addictive and and you get withdrawal symptoms. So, anytime you become dependent on something like this, you create potential problems. And especially in the modern world, so like before, right, you wanted to get some nicotine in your system, you had to smoke it. Like now there's like a million ways to get it in the system, and there's like you can get a lot more nicotine than you ever could previously. And I think that's causing big problems, and especially the route that you get it, that's causing a lot of problems. So there are certainly some people who say they benefit from small doses of nicotine, like a milligram, like they chew it in a gum or something like that. They feel like their brain performs better. I'm not going to say people should or shouldn't do that, but in the bigger context, it is habit forming, does cause withdrawal symptoms. You just have to balance that with your other priorities.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
This traditional idea that eating lots of carbs, that spikes lots of insulin, and then that causes insulin resistance, in and of itself, I don't think that that's actually what's happening. As people become metabolically unhealthy, or they become insulin resistant, there does seem to be this